always feel this was such a nice episode. I always feel that they should have we should have gotten some better recognition for this episode. Should have won an award, or at least been nominated for more awards. See what I mean about the compositions? You have all the lines of the cannon and the robot pointing down towards Dib. A lot of angles coming down towards the characters to say, "Hey, you as the viewer, look down there. This is what we're pointing at." But it's still giving you information in the scene that you as a viewer get to see if there's a robot there. Or there's story elements that you need to read. Here's another 9/11 note. This destruction of the city here was a little bit more varied. We had cars flying into buildings and things burning. We had to cut out just a few quick scenes though. Originally, the camera cap wasn't on there. If you look really closely, the camera cap was put on in 3D, and I think in the color correction by Jay Bondi, our color director. It was a big ordeal to get the lens cap on and all these. The original prop didn't have a lens cap on it. It was a regular camera. We never noticed until the footage came back, and it was the last week to work on the show. That's a vulture, by the way, in case you don't know. Originally, Zim was supposed to have the camera. Victory for me gets squashed by the rock. Would have made more sense, but we ended up having Jonan wanted something extra, so he put in a vulture pulling it off. But it's hard to read the vulture. It goes through too quick. And then, of course, there's this end sequence. This is the whole thing with Invader 10 and the explosion that we had to cut out because of 9/11. Originally, she just has a bomb blow off right in her face. Louis Del Carmen had to board out this to make this work. Guy just runs up to her with a bomb, plants it in front of her. There was a countdown, it blows up, and there's the explosion still left, which just came off as a shock. Pity. Lice. Rob Hummel's story. Ray and Ian storyboarding. We always had a lot of criticism from viewers, not fans, but just average viewers of the show, claimed the show was always yelling. It was always Dib yelling or Zim yelling. I remember somebody told me that right at the point where this episode was being done. And there we see Dib just yelling like a maniac in the beginning. The lice idea was awesome. I think that Rob Hummel really came up with a neat idea. Because I remember as a kid there was always lice scares in school. And I don't remember anybody with lice, but, they had the combs, and they'd always make sure kids didn't have lice. I assume that lice is a far bigger problem than I ever expected. In Western civilization, I just never see an outbreak of lice. I've never been around one. I've never known anybody with lice. But yet, in poorer countries and in worse times, there always seems to be a worry of lice. So to have lice actually infecting the head was really a funny thing. And the Verminstrasser character, played by the woman who played Frau Farbissida in Austin Powers, came in to do this voice. It was a great touch. It was the series, or the show, was originally called Lice Nazis, or Lice Nazi, and we couldn't use the name Nazi for some reason, which I don't know why. I mean, kids can learn about Nazis in school. There was nothing humorous, and there was no Nazi symbolism going on. We just called it Lice Nazi, and this has nothing to do with Nazis. But Nazi is a pretty general term. I think it's probably used more in British entertainment than in American entertainment, where somebody that's being what would be called a fascist, or very officious sort of a person, somebody would call them a Nazi, or will call them a Nazi. Something I think Americans don't do very much, but it's a pity we couldn't have used the name. It's a very good name. It emoted a lot of emotion. Just the memories of Nazis are something that's a little bit taboo, I guess, still in America. Again, the physical humor, which is just wonderful to see kids banging their heads together, kids scratching. It's great to see children, or not children, but just characters in a show actually interacting. They're feeling something. That's one of the strengths, at least, of this episode, and of Zim, I think, in period. It's just that you see characters actually interacting with themselves or with their environment. Usually, in most cartoons, characters are just floating through the backgrounds, and have a bit of dialogue with each other, but nobody seems to be talking to each other. Nobody seems to be interacting with their environment. Nobody seems to even be, you know, noticing anything outside of just happiness. And yet in Zim, you could have people in pain. They could be scratching themselves violently. They could be beaten up or beating other people, getting shot or blown up. People in fear of reprisals or of anything. So there's a far greater, I think, a far broader sort of sense of emotions on that side, on the pain and pleasure side in Zim. And I think it sort of broadened the show a bit. It made it feel a little bit more, I don't know if you could even say real, but I think it just gave a little bit more appeal to the characters. But I think on the other side, I think there was just a little bit too much emotive power behind the characters too. Where, like a lot of people said, the characters were always yelling. So I think it got tiring with certain viewers to always have the characters at their full impact. They were always just very strung out. They were yelling, they were crying, they were doing anything. They were, exclaiming happiness. Very emphatic characters, and I think they could have calmed down a bit occasionally to sort of give a pause for people to regroup and understand what the story was about. Everything seemed very important in the shows. Everybody's life, every moment that they were spending seemed very, very important by the way that they reacted to everything. And we could have paced that a bit better. It's also good to see something more about Zim. It was very nice in this episode. His skin could kill the lice. And you would think that people would think something about this, that there is something wrong with Zim. And again, there's also a tie there with Bitter's, where Bitter's skin repels these creatures. I always felt they might be leading up, or Jonan and the writers might be leading up to the possibility that Bitter's is an alien as well. Possibly a tallest that was banned or escaped or sort of fled or was exiled to Earth. Our camera goes all over the place in this episode. We ended up cameras just all over the rooms. It's quite a varied episode with shots, not as stable a piece of cinematography as most of the shows were. Well, a lot of the shows were. End up crossing the line quite a bit. It was good to see Melvin come back. Melvin was in our pilot episode, which nobody saw. It was never aired on TV. I think it was aired on TV once for a Kids' Choice Award, but it was nice to have him back. Melvin in the pilot talks about his space suit he wants to make and go into space, and Bitters just tears him a new one, criticizing his space suit. Those are supposed to be landmines on the floor, by the way. I don't know if anybody noticed that, but it was supposed to be landmines. So as the kids run around escaping, they would blow up, but we never showed them blowing up. I don't know if we could show them blowing up. We'd probably have had problems with New York